Welcome to another episode of the Love in Reality podcast. I am your host, Ricky Valero. On today's episode, I'm going to share my thoughts on the three latest episodes of Love is Blind Season 4. At the end of the episode, I will be sharing who I think after these episodes will and will not be saying yes at the altar. Before we dive into this week's episodes, I want to talk about giving you guys a big thank you for listening to the podcast since the launch of the show. In case you've missed previous episodes, I talked about episodes 1 through 5. I have interviews with Perfect Matches Izzy Fairthorn and Abby Humphries. I have an interview with Love is Blind Daniel Rule. And then I have interviews with the cast of season 4 of Love is Blind on the ladies' side that I dropped just last week. Make sure you subscribe because I have a lot of fun interviews coming for you guys in the near future. I spoke to Love is Blind and Perfect Matches Shane Jansen. I talked to LC from Perfect Match. And then, of course, I spoke to Nick, Big Daddy Nick. So, like I said, make sure you're subscribing and hitting that, whatever button you're listening to this podcast on. Make sure to hit that button so the new episodes drop each and every week for you guys. All right, that being said, let's kick off with the show here. Episode 5 gave us, or episode 6, apologize. Episode 6 popped up and it said, all of the couples are heading home and we are 21 days away from the wedding. 21. Man, that is not that far away to go ahead and tie that knot, is it? We are counting down. I feel like after we leave the pods, the episodes just fly right on by. This episode kicked off with Zach and Paul meeting to discuss their relationship, with Zach telling Paul that no matter what he does on a daily basis, he needs to remind Micah how much she's great, how much he likes her, how much he cares about her, which I just found a little bit funny how he kind of just went from, this mode of having somebody that didn't share that same, love and compassion towards his way, to making sure that he needed to remind Paul to do the same thing with Micah. And then, of course, this met. Then we have a definitely interesting chain of events happen where we see Micah and Irina meet. And this is one of the more fascinating meets of the show because Irina oddly tells Micah about her crush of Paul. Like, these two were thick as thieves on the first 5 episodes. They were BFFs. They were chilling by the pool. They were making fun of people. They were quote unquote being those mean girls. And now she happens to tell Micah that she might have a little bit of a crush on Paul, which I found quite intriguing, even though she didn't mention the fact that Paul did kind of flirt a little bit with Irina poolside too, if you guys recall. Like, it did happen. I do remember that as well. All right, how we're going to break these down is I'm going to go through couple by couple through the 3 episodes, what kind of, just some brief cliff notes of what I took down as what transpired through these episodes that I thought were, important enough to talk about. First off, our favorite couple of all time, Brett and Tiffany. I love these two. I'm telling you right now, if we live in a world where these two don't make it, I think they just need to go ahead and cancel the show. It will never be that good. Now, if they do make it, I am pitching the idea of Brett and Tiffany becoming the new host of Love is Blind because they are truly that perfect match. Tiffany and Brett meet her friends. Her friends begin to grill Brett on why he loves her and why he picked her. Brett, he funnily just brings up how she fell asleep on him, but then her friends bring up that that's something she does all the time. She falls asleep on people all the time. So it's funny to kind of hear that dynamic. The two of them really hit it off with her friends. Great meeting, great couple. We're moving right along. One night, Tiffany's cooking dinner for Brett. She brings up the money in his spending habits. As we've seen in his apartment, he's very high tech, if you can say. He likes to have everything, kind of electronic. Everything has to turn on a certain way, app oriented, et cetera, et cetera. I thought this was like going to lead into a little bit of a headbutting, and maybe it did that we didn't see quite yet, but it did lead to a funny moment where she asked him what was the most expensive thing that he bought, and he bought a check bag for $1,200 and then proceeded to call him Bougie Brett, which was hilarious. I love these two so much. Brett kind of just was calm, cool, and collect like he has been in like every single episode, right? Every single episode we've seen him so far, calm, cool, and collect. He said he's not nervous at all. He is relaxed and ready to rock and roll. Moving on to Paul and Micah. These two are now saying that their physical connection is matching that emotional level. Um, I it what? I never really felt like these two really have kind of hit it off. I was very confused by this comment. But then Micah heads into Paul's apartment, quite critical of his apartment. I do love the fact that Paul randomly had a pocket knife near every junction of his house. He had a pocket knife sitting there waiting for him. She followed by saying she would probably get rid of most of his stuff in his house, which I didn't mind this. I don't criticize Micah for saying this. Anybody that's ever had a significant other, they want to put their touch on your place, or they like to decorate how they want to decorate. And as a man, you just let it happen. You know what I mean? It doesn't really matter. It's just stuff. If that's just a small token of what they want, you give them that little token of what they want. You know what I mean? It's nothing to worry about here. I thought Micah was perfectly fine in saying that she'd get rid of all of his stuff, but I just found that really funny. And then we see Micah bring up Arizona because we've heard that she bridges her living where she's partly in Arizona, partly in Washington, in Seattle there, and stuff like that, which Paul shut it down. Like, he immediately shut it down. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a concern. It wasn't a possibility. It was a shut down right away when she brought up the idea. Could this be the thing that tears these two apart? Paul's about to meet Micah's family, which Micah has not told her mom she's engaged. So that was interesting. I'll tell you what. The meeting went really well. Very supportive family. You know what I mean? I do love the certain dynamics whenever we see them. I don't mind the grilling. I don't mind the questions. I don't mind even the optimistic approach to this. Because for me personally, you're talking about going on a show, you're falling in love, getting married in this short amount of time. But we've seen in the show it's possible. And families don't understand that, especially traditional families, families of culture. We've seen with Kwame and Chelsea that has been a little bit of an issue, but I just felt like some families handle better than others. You know what I mean? And I thought Micah's did pretty well. I do say this: my biggest issue of the whole entire 8th episode was Micah's friends just throwing it at Paul over and over again. Again, I understand wanting to protect your friends. I do. I promise you, I do. You want to protect your friends. You want to make sure your friend's heart's good. You want to make sure that your friend's not going through some stuff. I totally understand and get that. However, that one friend, I don't even remember her name. I completely forgot her name. All I'm going to say is Micah needs new friends. How she threw it at Paul. Now, the problem is you threw it at Paul, and then Paul kind of gave it back to her, which I loved, right? Paul's like, I'm not going to just sit here and take this beat down and listen to you say that, I've gotten rid of Micah's boyfriends in the past, blah, 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 blah. He doesn't have to listen to that. And Micah should understand that he shouldn't have to. If it's playful, if it's joking, if it's stuff like that, so be it, right? That's one dynamic. However, on the flip side of that, when we're getting married in by the time this was probably 2.5 weeks out. I'm getting married to this man, and you are acting like a straight fool. You know what I'm saying? I understand the questions and concerns. Maybe you are concerned about Paul, and maybe you don't, maybe you have some questions about Paul, but this was not the time or the place to A, treat Paul like this, and B, maybe it's something you talk about with Micah, in the background. You know what I'm saying? But I thought Paul handled himself well there. And yeah, still very iffy about those two at the altar. I'll come up with a decision by the time we get done with talking about this episode. Marshall and Jackie, the whirlwind of 3 episodes for these two. There's some highs, some lows, and everywhere in between. Jackie, recently it came out that Jackie was struggling due to her family, which only heightens what we see. It's one thing that I'd like to remind everybody at home. I try to do this with these with all of these podcasts that I've been doing and sitting down and talking to these individuals is trying to understand the human aspect of these people. These people are very much humans. Yes, they are putting themselves out there on national TV for questions and criticism and all this stuff, but we're all human at the end of the day, and we all make mistakes. So finding out those little bit details of what was going on behind the scenes was something that was interesting, because it does make a whole lot of sense. In the midst of one of their battles, Jackie asked Marshall to be a little bit more aggressive, instead of being an old grandpa, and then Marshall mistakenly calls Jackie a project, which I understood what he was trying to say, but you never say it the way that you say it, right? You know what I mean? Marshall feels like he can be the person that makes Jackie the person she's meant to be, right? You know what I mean? Project was a terrible word. It was an awful word. Shouldn't have said it. 1000% agree. But all of this led to these two hugging, and saying they're sorry. We'll talk a little bit more about Chelsea's party here in a little bit. We'll dive about these two's relationship, that we find out a little bit more. But Kwame and Chelsea, these two mesh well, pretty good together in the transition back home. They both see each other's places. Kwame brought up his mom isn't 100% for this. I've talked about it before, where I just feel like his mom's in the wrong here. I feel like I am, her saying she's not happy for Kwame. That's something to me that's really kind of messed up. This is your son, and I understand this unconventional way of going about getting married and all these things, and you don't have to say 100% I support your decision of what you're doing, or anything like that. However, treating him like this is something that is pretty gruesome. One little huge bickerman here between the two of these was the fact that Kwame is a few hours away from his safe space, right? You know what I mean? He's 3 hours from where he lives, so he doesn't have that safe place where he can kind of run to and kind of be in that chill mode of not understand, like, you know what I mean? We all have that pocket, as he liked to say, that pocket. You know what I mean? Chelsea could go to her mom's house. She can go to her friend's house. She can do this. Kwame's kind of away from everything out. And he felt like he was suffocating from everything that was going on. These two, I think, are strong. And I think they have a good relationship, maybe even a good foundation. But there's a few things that are kind of holding back what I think could potentially see them both saying yes at the altar. But Zach is back. Not mad about it. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm a little bit mad about it. I don't know. Maybe he should have just picked the right person to begin with. But Bliss and him meet, and I'll tell you what, the chemistry between these two outside the pod, not good. Not good at all. I'm not a big fan of how this dynamic worked outside the pod. To me, they were like two peas in the pod together. They're just very funny, charming. Outside, I just didn't feel the chemistry at all. Like, she's standoffish. She didn't love being the second choice. He kind of chastised her a little bit for saying anything about it, which I didn't love that either, because she's not wrong. She was his second choice, right? She was the second choice. He's literally like coming after her because of a failed engagement, right? You're coming back from Mexico from a failed engagement. So it was definitely interesting to me to watch this unfold, only for it to lead to him trying to be a little bit handsy. You know what I mean? He's trying to be a little handsy with her, and she wasn't having it. Like, if you watch it, it was kind of just like, I don't want to sit here and say this cut and dry, but to me, part of this felt like, is Bliss on this journey for a little bit extra TV time? That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say about it. I'm not going to, maybe she really does. I'm not saying she doesn't love Zach, but you know what I mean? It's definitely interesting to kind of see how she's, but then he proposes, right? And she says yes, like just yes. You know what I'm saying? So it was, I don't know. It's definitely an interesting one. I'm not 100% certain how I feel about these two heading to the altar. And like I said, wasn't a big fan of Bliss getting belittled a little bit by him for being that second choice. I mean, I understand him not wanting her to harp on it, but I don't know. All right, so that is all of the couples. We're going to talk about a few quotes, final thoughts, and then, of course, we're going to dive into the couples where I think they're going to stay at the altar after episode 5 through 8. And then I'm going to rehash this again before we dive into the finale, going through 9, 10, and 11, which drop 1 week from today. If you're listening to this, it'll drop on April the 7th. Good Friday. All right, so Chelsea had a birthday. And what a party this was. First things first, we saw everybody there except for Marshall and Jackie. Marshall showed up by himself. Jackie showed up a little bit later. Yeah. And it just, they have this weird dynamic here that we find out that they've been arguing and fighting and bickering, and he moved out and they weren't having it. Like he just, like they were just not having at it, and they were arguing consistently, and then they were kind of making up, like what we saw earlier in the episodes. But these two are on the rocks, and things do not get any better when Josh arrives. I am going to sit here and say this, that Josh is going to get a lot of hate, and maybe understandably because of what he did. However, I respect the hell out of Josh, because Josh came in, shot his shot, and said, you know what? I had feelings for this girl. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go into this party. I'm going to tell her how I feel, and I'm going to try to win this girl back. And you have to have nothing but respect for that man for that. I'm telling you. Look, you can be mad all day. Was it wrong? Maybe. But I respect Josh for the game that he came in there. I'll tell you what, one thing I will say though, he was loud as shit. Like he was like, they were doing interviews with everybody else, and you could just hear Josh in the background just being very loud. I don't know what it was. It was just hilarious. I mean, obviously there's alcohol in play, etc. But mad respect to Josh. Interesting to see what's going to happen. He confronted Jackie, and when he does, like he just he throws Marshall under the bus, man. He's the loudest human being in the world. He just came in to wreak havoc and profess his love for Jackie, which he did. He tells Jackie that Marshall was crying with everyone, that he didn't think it was just her. And then Josh finishes off by looking at her and said, are you going to marry him? And obviously talking about Marshall. What a dynamic. This was insane. One of the craziest moments we've seen. Drama was stirred. The pot was stirred. Everything was stirred here. I loved it. Incredible TV moment. It's going to be interesting to see how everybody handles all this. Because like I said, Josh is going to come out to be a bad guy. Maybe Jackie becomes a bad guy. But you know what? This is a lot. This shows a lot. And we're on the cusp of getting married here. You know what I mean? These people are on the cusp of getting married. You know, what can you say? So that being said, a few other tidbits from the party. Amber arrived, which was the final two for Paul, with Paul and Amber. He avoided her like the plague. Funny. Kwame said that Micah had a special place in his heart, and she said she really still cares about him. I don't know what to do with these two. I mean, I genuinely don't. Let's see here. A few funny quotes from the episode. Let's see. Irina said, couldn't get over the fact that how he touched me made me feel, talking about Zach. Just Irina was so terrible to Zach, but Bougie Brett loved her saying that. That was pretty funny. And then Micah mentions loving his mom, but then of course, you know, she's happy for, you know, her mom's happy for you know, mentions being happy for Paul, and then basically saying you're marrying your mom. And yeah, that was definitely interesting. All right, here we go, folks. Like I said, make sure to tune in back next week. This Tuesday, I've got an interview with Shane Jansen dropping from Love is Blind Perfect Match. We talk about a lot of different things from his time on Perfect Match. A lot of good details, including showing a very vulnerable side of himself that I really enjoyed. And then, of course, next Friday, come back next week while we discuss those final 3 episodes before the wedding. Very excited about that. But without further ado, who will say yes at the altar? I'm going to go through each couple here, right? Brett and Tiffany. I got a double yes so far. I swear if these two ain't it, we'll cancel the show forever. Paul and Micah, I still think Paul says no. I don't think these two are marriage material. I will say this: if Micah goes first, she will say yes, Paul will say no. You know what I mean? I just feel like that's the dynamic that we're going to get there. Marshall and Jackie, if we make it to the altar, I guess I don't even know what's going to go on with those two. It's ever changing, but if they make it to the altar, Marshall will say yes. I think Jackie will say no. Kwame and Chelsea. I don't know what it is about these two. I believe in these two. I think it'll work. And I think it'll work because I don't know. I just feel like they have a good foundation. You know what I mean? It's definitely been interesting and maybe a little bit weird to watch these two. But personally, I've really enjoyed how they've handled a lot of different aspects of the show. I felt Chelsea's really kind of, stood her ground in some things, maybe a little too much, but at the same time, she's been very nurturing, caring, while Kwame goes through some stuff. So I think both of these are going to make it. And then for Zach and Bliss, I think Zach says yes. And right now I'm saying Bliss says no. I don't know. I don't really love those two. So it's not that I don't love that. I think Zach's not a bad person. He just got dealt a shitty card because he made the wrong decision. Let's be real. You know what I'm saying? But definitely interesting. So that's it for this week's episode of the Love and Reality podcast. Like I said, thank you guys so much for listening to last week. Let's dive right back in. Remember, you can follow me on the social media aspects of things at Ricky Valero on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I'll be posting little clips and videos of my interviews from the press junket that I did to Love is Blind season 4 to my upcoming interviews. Like I said, I've got Nick, Elsie, and Shane all coming up on the radar. You can check me out on those social media platforms for the upcoming schedule. But like I said, we'll talk to you guys next week.